Pedro from EMP Reacts. I'm here today with Chris of The Sound That Ends Creation. What an epic name. Let me just start off by saying that. You have a new album coming out November 5th, and I want you to give me a little bit of an insight on the title of this record. What's the inspiration behind this title?
Well, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be on here. As far as the title goes, it was mainly because it rhymed, but also I think there's so many people that have like differing opinions, and a lot of people can't see what other people are thinking. Like the kids don't understand how the adults are thinking. The adults don't understand how the kids are thinking, and nobody understands how a Coomer's thinking. So, but mainly it's just because it's funny and it rhymes.
So is the Zoomers your new take on this new generation that is living now through Zoom?
No, Zoomers are the young kids that are starting to grow up and get more responsibilities.
Oh, is that what
I kind of feel like I'm a Zoomer, but I guess I'm a millennial. I'm not sure how that works exactly. But
well, I guess I'm not either a boomer or a Zoomer, so I don't know where I fall under this category, but that's maybe a topic for a different conversation.
I think you're a boomer if you find yourself saying, I have no idea what the kids are into these days. Then you might be a boomer. Like I'm approaching boomer.
So maybe I have some boomer moments.
I think we all have boomer moments.
Some boomer moments. When you start thinking about a record, and specifically this album, what is your starting point? Where do you start from?
So this time around, the way I got inspiration was to take jazz records and speed them up about 2 times, and then take that and try to make it like a grindcore song. So that's where I got the inspiration for all the songs. And I would record guitar, like as I'm going along, I'm recording like the guitars, and then I get into drums and then the keys and all that other stuff. But yeah, it starts out with getting some inspiration from some old jazz.
Wow. What a starting point. I mean, it's obvious that it has an impact on the soundscape of this record. I mean, you cannot listen to this album without realizing that there is some huge jazz influence, but I didn't think that was going to be your starting point. I thought that was like an addition into the overall soundscape that you're trying to create.
Kind of. So I started incorporating more jazz elements on my last album, and I was just thinking like, how can I take it to the next level? Like I want to incorporate more and more jazz, but it's hard to like come up with the rhythms and like the rhythms and stuff of the music of jazz. So I was like, let's just speed up some jazz records and try to copy it.
Looking at this new record, what do you feel that it sets it perhaps apart from the previous 5 albums?
Well, that the more jazzy aspect, of course, but also what I was really trying to do this time was to separate the instruments. I don't know if you had a chance to check out my last one, Memes, Dreams, and Flying Machines, but I did add like horns and piano and stuff like that. But all the instruments were kind of going along with each other. There wasn't much diversity, I guess you could say. This time around, I wanted each instrument to be doing something different at all times, and mostly achieve that. There's still some times where they go together, but it mostly achieved that. I'm sorry about that. I left my notifications on.
Do you feel like there's a red line, not just within the album, but a red line across all of your records that kind of ties them all in together? Or they're kind of like separate snapshots of where you were at that moment?
More like separate snapshots. Now, as recently as like the probably my second to last album, I started to get more into like the overall idea for like the lyrics and stuff. A lot of it is more like we're kind of messed up. Humanity might be destroyed at any moment. Might as well live your life, right? So it's like jokes that go along with really dark themes.
Yeah, he's just trying to pack it all in there. When you're putting these songs together, there's a lot for the listener to digest. I mean, my brain was getting pulled in 100 different directions in terms of everything that you're throwing at me. I mean, I feel like you're throwing everything in the kitchen sink. So is it hard for you? Because you said that you liked to, for this album, you wanted to keep the elements separated so that you could appreciate every single piece. Was that hard to achieve considering how many things are coming to the table?
Actually, not really, honestly. The way that I would do it is so I would record all the guitars first for all the different songs, and then I would go back through after I recorded all the songs on guitar and like fix up the drums and make them really nice, and then go back and then do the piano for all the songs, then go back and do the horns and then the vocals, etc. Each time this would leave like 2 weeks in between, so I would be approaching a song completely forgetting how it sounded, and that lets me like figure out where this instrument could fit better, if that makes sense, rather than like thinking that one way to do it is the only way to do it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So yeah, I was just trying to approach the song multiple times but differently, if that makes
From
sense.
different angles.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Is that the approach that gives you the best end result? It allows you to be more creative?
I feel like it does. Before I would listen to these songs and do one song at a time, like all the elements for each one. And I would find myself like humming this song like randomly throughout the day and be like, oh, this is like stuck in my head, so this has to be a good song, right? And I would end up putting a mediocre song on an album because I thought it was good because it was stuck in my head, you know? And it also kind of limits what, for me at least, limits the creative possibilities in the song, because I think that we need to have it be that rhythm and that melody and all that stuff, and we can't like deviate from that, if this makes sense.
What about the movie and TV themes that you add, those samples that you use? What are you trying to give the track with those?
I don't know if you were into like mathcore back in the day, like early 2000s, but the samples were a big deal back in the day, and I'm more just trying to hearken to that stuff. But it adds a bit
Now,
of, like,
now you're sounding like a boomer back in the day.
yes. But it adds a little bit more comedy to it too, you know? I want people to be laughing with like a confused smile on their face and just have no idea what the heck is happening until they like listen multiple times and then finally start to understand.
So based on that, what picture are you hoping this album paints for the listener? One of fun confusion, or do you have another goal in mind that you're hoping that your listeners can extract from this album?
Fun confusion sounds correct, actually. It's not far off at all. Yeah, I just want to like push the boundaries of sound in general. I don't think any band's really sounding the way that I do on this album. I don't want to sound cocky, but I think I did a pretty good job at like pushing the boundaries.
I can tell you, I've never heard an album like this. I didn't know which way I was turning with the record, because, like I said, you were able to mix a lot of different styles, bringing them all in together. But somehow, within the chaos, there's like a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. And I like your approach. It's very eclectic. It's very different. It's very unique. It's really hard to define. Like, are you able to define a genre or something to label this record as?
So the way I would approach like bloggers and stuff, like telling them about the album, you know, you have to tell them like you know, for fans of that kind of thing, I would be like, so this is essentially if a jazz band played grindcore with sick breakdowns. It's hard to come up with an FFO. I doubt you ever heard a band like this before. Haha. And that would be my opening line for like an email or whatever. So I have no idea. I guess you could call it jazzcore. That's kind of the way I've been leaning, but mathcore is a bigger umbrella right now. So I tend to go with that genre more.
I want to go back into the jazz. Do you have a jazz background? Was there an influence growing up listening to jazz? Because I'm a big fan of jazz. I really like the vibe, the sound, the experience that it gives. And I felt like you included it perfectly in this chaos that you've created. It's actually, I felt like it was actually the light at the end of that tunnel was the jazz influence on the record. Did you have a jazz background, or was that an influence growing up?
I really, really appreciate you saying that. That is awesome. That's totally the goal I was going for. But so I don't really have a jazz background, and I'm still kind of new to jazz. But where this came from is I grew up listening to oldies, like the Temptations, Elvis, that kind of thing, you know. And this was a more complicated version of oldies, if that makes sense. At least that's the way that I approached it. This really started when I was watching, I don't know if you pay attention to anime, but I was watching this anime called Kakegurui from Netflix, which is about like teenagers gambling at school, whatever. But they have an opening that's a jazz song that's like this super fast swing song, and I was like, dude, what happens if we turn that into metal? And so that's kind of where like the approach came from to start out with. But yeah, it's more of a way to bring in like the oldies influences into this without it being oldies, if that makes sense.
It- how do you define or how do you decide which jazz sound or which jazz sample do you want to use on a specific track? Because the other thing is with so much chaos, perhaps it's easy to get lost a little bit. It's hard sometimes to see the forest from the trees. But I felt like listening to the album that the jazz sounds that you employed into the track fit the track perfectly. Like it added value to what the song had to give. So how do you decide that? How do you define those moments in terms of what to use on which track to go with?
I don't know, man. It's just a gut feeling. It's,
If it sounds right.
yeah. Like I said, I would take like weeks off in between the song, in between working on each song, and come back to it fresh, so I could think about a better way to implement like the instrument I was going to work on for that day. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. It's just a gut feeling.
Will we ever see you perform with a jazz band?
That would be awesome. That would be
I think
so
that would
cool.
be sick. I think that would be sick.
Right now, I'm a broke musician. You know what I mean? So I can't hire a band or anything. But at some point, that would be really, really cool. I actually plan on doing some shows where it's just me playing the guitar and having like the jazz stuff being a backing track.
Wow, wow. It's incredible. I think you do a phenomenal job bringing all of these different flavors together. It's like a gumbo of musical flavor. Where do the vocals come in? At what part of the creative process do you start thinking about your vocal approach for a track?
The very end, that's the very last thing that happens. I actually hate writing lyrics. Like I try to put this off as much as possible, but yeah. So vocals very end.
Well, you hate writing lyrics because my next question was about the lyrical content. How if you hate writing it, how come I feel like the lyrical content that's really important on these tracks? How do you balance those two?
Uh, so I hate them because I hate trying to come up with like topics to talk about, you know. But once I get into it, I feel like I'm pretty good at like, you know, making things rhyme and bringing in some like odd topics and stuff in like subtopics into the main topic. But yeah, I hate coming up with ideas.
For your vocals, you take a little bit in terms of where you're going to go with your range and with your style. You take a little bit from what the lyrical content is. So if the song has a little bit more of a push of an anger feel, you go with one way. If it has more of a sad feel, you go with another way.
I feel like the majority of it is anger, actually. So
Yeah,
it all kind of fits. As far as like vocal influences, I don't know if you've heard of Cameron McBride. He actually guested on my first single for this album. But he does these ridiculous highs that I can't even like describe them. It would like break glass, you know? So I've always tried to do that, but I can't do it. So I'm trying to get as close to that as possible for my highs. And the lows, just the dirtiest thing I could possibly think of. Like moving around the tongue in weird ways and such, you know? So,
Did any microphone get damaged or hurt in the process of making this album? Because I'm listening to the record and I swear to God, in my mind, I can visual you like double fisting the mic and just absolutely destroying it on some of these tracks.
no microphones were harmed in the creation of this album, but yeah, just try to push myself as hard as possible, you know.
How much of creating this album takes from you? Like, do you give a lot of yourself in that moment, and therefore the record becomes a piece of you that stays for posterity? Is that how you envision the creation of an album?
Absolutely. I whenever I'm working on an album, that's all I can really think about. So that's for this one. It's about all I did for 8 months was just working on this stuff. So yeah, I would say there's definitely a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it.
When I started listening to the record, I kind of lost track of time, and next thing you know, the album is finished. I mean, the album is not really long. It's not like there's a lot of things for you to digest as far as the tracks go. That quick punch, that coming to the point really quickly, is that something that you feel like suits your style and suits your sound because it allows the listener to just kind of hop from song to song and get that quick fix?
Yeah, I feel like it's actually super important for this style, where everything's just like a huge wall of sound essentially coming at you. I would rather have people begging for more than like saying when is this going to be over. You know what I mean? I feel like most albums should be like around 35 to 40 minutes at the most, and something like this, that it should be like as short as possible. I went over 20 minutes just so I could say it's an album, but I would have really rather gone like 16 or something, just to get like the best songs possible, and get people to be like, oh, let's run it back. You know what I mean?
So when you look at it, to me, it felt almost like I was listening to one song that has different chapters. Is that a good way to put it?
I guess so. I mean, it's however you feel. You know what I mean? They're all sort of related lyrically, so yeah.
Yeah, it's up to the listener, I guess. I mean, I always say that with the moment you make the music and you put it out there, it's no longer yours. It belongs to all of us that are listening to it. So to me, it kind of felt like I was going through peaks and valleys, almost like portions. Like when you watch a movie, the movie may have one single theme, but there's different moments within that movie. You know, like an action scene, a more angry scene, a fight scene, this and that. And I kind of felt like the record was a little bit like that.
I did try to organize the songs and stuff in a way where it's like not as fatiguing, and like there would be some like slower moments at certain points. So I did try to like get a good flow to it.
I got one last question for you. I always feel like a record paints not just a picture of where you are at the moment when you create the album, but it also leaves perhaps a scar, or leaves a piece of itself within the person that created the album. As you start to walk away from this record, I know the album hasn't come out yet, but the album is done. So as you start to walk away from this record, what are you taking away from this album with you? What marked you? What kind of scar has this record left on you?
Huh. That's a really good question. I guess, well, so in terms of like lessons, what I want to try to do next time around is incorporate more like slower bits. Because that was the most feedback that I gotten, was that, you know, maybe it should be broken up a little bit more so that people have a chance to recover. You know what I mean? So yeah, just like add more slow like jammy bits. You know what I mean? Instead of just going a million miles an hour.
Yeah, it's definitely a million miles an hour, dude. What a ride. What a ride. I mean, this is incredible. Chris, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate you chatting with me, talking about the record. The name of the band is The Sound That Ends Creation. The record is Boomers, Zoomers, and Desperate
Boomers.
There you go. I left that one for you. I teed it up for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
No, thank you.